Alrighty, so here's how I approach this problem. And I'll just tell you, I do have working code at this point. So if I hit edit, let me just go ahead and let it run. What happens is all the edit and delete buttons are disabled. And then the only thing that I can do is hit submit and update the values in the form. Okay, and then as soon as I hit submit, then they come back. So I decided that the easiest thing to do would be to add a class to the buttons. Okay, so first I set up a class. I did give it a radius, and radius is just a little bit of rounded corner. So let me show you that. I started there in my CSS file. So if you could have done anything. You could have made it a different background color. You could have gave it a different padding. You could play with that, right? So I liked like if I did padding. Again, the more you know CSS, the better. Notice, yeah, okay, I don't really like that because it smashes them up together. Okay, so then you just put some. You don't have to. Again, this is just the approach I used. And then because in my CSS I gave it a dot notation, that tells it that it's a class. Okay, that it's going to be a class selector. So then what I needed to do is think about, okay, where am I rendering these buttons? Well, render file, that makes sense. So I'd go to my render file, and this is what's key, and let me kind of roll up first and think about, we've set the event listeners for both the edit and delete, right? And remember, those are asynchronous, which means this code does not run until the user clicks something. So the context of the page is gone, and all we're running is the code in here. So what I would need to do is somewhere either before or after these event listeners, what I would do is say I'd reference the button, which I already have set up as a created DOM element. I'd say in this case it's called class list. Okay, so if we looked at class list just to see what it does, right? Element class list, right? It's an easy way to then add a class. You can add it to whatever element you want, and then that would be the name of it. Okay. Trying to look at a little better example. Yeah, so there on add, you could add multiple classes, which is kind of cool. You can also remove classes, which is helpful at times, replace them. Okay. Anyway, you can read through there and see the different ways that you can use this. So I added a class to both the button and the deletes, right? So if you want to see that, once I did that step and I made sure this step worked, right? And here's how you do it is you right click, hit inspect, and all this time we've been spending most of our time on sources, you can go to the elements, and then if you get this correct, you'll see class, and then you will see the class name, whatever you gave it. I gave it BTL button, table button, just to kind of keep it hopefully clearer. Okay, so now that those are there, now I have to think about where on these buttons, because remember what delete does, right? Delete is just going to delete that item, boom, there's nothing going to happen. I'm not going to disable anything because it immediately re-renders the page. So where I'd want this code is on my edit. All right, so here's what I did is I ended up setting up a selector. Okay, I set up a selector for query selector all btn. And that way, when I did this, ran this selector, I got back, because it returns to me what is query selector. It's a node list, I believe. We looked at that. So it's an array that I can run for each on, array-like object that I can run for each on. So then I said edit, disable edit. For each of them, I have a callback function. Remember, it iterates over each of the buttons. And in this case, actually, I should rename this edit, because it's not just, I'm just going to say btn because it's all the buttons. It's not just the edit button, right? This is all the buttons, because my query selector is going to look at anything with that class. Okay. Even though this code is specific to the edit, I can still run a query selector for any buttons in there. Doesn't matter. Because they're on the DOM itself. So then for each one of them, I referenced each as a button, and then I said set attribute disabled equal true. Okay, so this code runs, and let's just actually see it work its magic. Magic is kind of a hard word. That's not a hard word. Okay, so if I am into the render, I'm on there, and I hit the edit, then I see it's going to call query selector. When I run that step, then if I go back over here, I see all the buttons in my table. Remember, this is a dynamically created table, so we won't know the number, which is why we want to run things like these DOM selectors. Okay, so then I'm going to run the first one. So the first button, right here it is, and you can even see as I roll over btn and you look over at the page, rendered page, you can see it selected that first one, and it's going to set the attribute to disable, and then you can just see it's starting to do its work. Okay, all right, that was my solution for this coding challenge. Let's see, that's now, yeah, I didn't actually write anything here. So this would be like code this up if you didn't get it working, right? Code this up, and then I'll give you a commit message to go along with this last one. I think I'll end up moving the higher order functions to the next one. All right, hope you had fun with this.